In this video, I'll be explaining you about the loops in Python, that is how the loops are used, how the loops and the various kinds of the loops used while you're working with the codes and your variables. So the very first loop we'll discuss over here is the while loop. Now it repeatedly executes a block of the statements as long as a test at the top keeps evaluating to be the true value. Now it is called a loop because the control keeps looping back to the start of the statement until the test becomes your false. Now when the test becomes the false, the control passes to the statement that follows the while block. If the test is false to begin with, the body never runs and the while statement is skipped. So there is a general loop format on the screen, that is the while statement consists of a header line with the text expressions, a body of one or more normally intended statements, and an optional else part over here. So before moving ahead, let me just explain you about the break, continuous, else and the pass statements used while you're working with your while loop over here. So the very first thing we'll talk about is the pass. Now pass does nothing at all. It's an empty statement placeholder. Pass statements are required when you have nothing useful to say. It is often used to code an empty body for a compound statement. Now, just reminding you, compound statements are those statements that can have other statements like your while loop and your if cases. Next is the continue. Now talking about the continue statement causes an immediate jump to the top of the loop. If you hit continue, then all the statements after continue statement are totally skipped and control goes back to the start of the program. Then next we'll talk about is the break. The break is the statement causes an immediate exit from a loop. The code that follows it in a loop is not executed if the break statement is reached. So after the break statement, all the execution of the statement is completely skipped. Next we have is the loop else. Now loop else block runs only and only if the loop is exited normally, that is without hitting a break. So if there's a loop which has not hit or which has not faced any break statement, then only this loop else block gets executed while you're working it out. So this was all about the while loop. Next we'll look on to the next screen, that is your hands-on. So in this we'll have a look on the hands-on, that is your programs we'll be discussing. We'll be having a look on the programs line by line. So the very first program is about the while loop. Now have a look on the screen. I have a while loop which is actually indicating that is the A is my 1, B is my 5, and this while loop runs, that is checks whenever A is smaller than my Y, that is the 1 or the value is smaller than your 5, then all these statements will be executed. So first time it will occur, it will check that if A is smaller than A is 1 and which is smaller than your 5, then it will print A and as well as add one number to your A. Now A is my 2, again the 2 is checked with respect to your 5 over here. Now again the condition is true, then it will print my A and add one number to my A. So now A is your 3. Now again the value with your A is equals to 3 is being checked with respect to your 5. Again it's for true, then the loop will run and finally the value is your 4. After this loop, final value of your A is your 4 and again the condition is your 4 greater than 5, which is true. Then in this block, in this code, in this loop, the value of your A gets 5. Now when the condition has been checked whether 5 is greater than 5, then definitely it won't give you any answer, that is it won't give you any true value as because actually 5 is equal to your 5. So then the loop will come out of the block over here and finally I'll get all the numbers printed on my screen. So this is how the while loop runs. I'll just show you the output so that you can understand, you can get this way properly. Now you can have a look. This is the output of the while loop where all the values of your A is being printed in a loop. Now moving ahead, we have the while else block over here. You can see that is the while. Now this program is to check whether the number is a prime or not. So what I've done is that I've taken a number from the user asking to enter a number. Now this number I've stored it with my variable number, and the number, the variable value provided by the user is divided by 2, and that divided by 2 value is stored in the X. Again in the while loop, I'm just comparing that up till the value, up till this condition is true, that is the X is greater than my 1, then this if loop will run. So if says that if this number and your modulus X is equals to 0, then definitely it is the factor of the X, and once you have found the first factor, it will just move out of the block, that is the break statement. So break statement completely gives you the out loop, that is it has nothing to do with this else block over here. Break will give you out of your loop at the end of your execution. Now this is the working of your break. Now when this condition is not true, then it will move, then the statement behind it, the statement below it is decrementing a number from my X. Then the number from your X will be decremented. Again the value, again the control moves to your value, that is checking your while loop with the decremented value of your X. Then again the if loop, the condition is checked. If it is true, then it will print this line. If it is not, again the decrement in the one value is done. So up till this while loop will run. Now once this condition gets false, the control will move to your else block, which simply states that this number is my prime as, because the condition over here gets to be the false. So let me just run it. You can conclude out the running in that way. That is, I'm just checking whether the number is the prime or not. I'm providing suppose 25. So 25 is having the factor 5, which will give the 25 has this factor. Now again, if you are running it with your if module, and now you are providing the value that is a kind of a prime number. You can look, that is the prime number. The 7 is my prime number. Now moving ahead, we have another example which is all about the continue. Have a look on the screen. I have a continue example over here. I'm taking my X. I've defined my X as the 50. Now while this X is 50, it will run the value, that is it will compute the X is greater than X is equals to minus 1. So decrementing a value from my X while this X is 50. Now once the value has been decremented, the decremented value will again be checked whether the modulus of this X2 is 0 or not. If it is 0, if it is not 0, then it will continue this loop. But if it is 0, the continue will give and the value of your X will be computed. So in the condition being X is equals to true, X is X. If this condition is true, then it will continue and the control will move again to your Y block over where, which simply checks with until the value is greater than your 50. So let me just run it so that you can understand it in a better way. Now in this way, I have got all the even values because the condition of my if simply states whether the modulus of your 2 is 0 or not. So continue statement has simply given a way to move this block continue, that is giving the control of your block or control of your program to again to my while block. Now this was just about the while. Next we'll talk about the for loop over here. Now talking about the for loop, we have for loop can step through the items in any ordered sequences or other iterable objects. That is, the for statement works on your strings, list, tuples and other built-in iterables as well as on new user defined objects. So there's a general format for your for loop. The Python for loop begins with a header line that specifies an assignment target along with the object you want to step through. So the header is followed by a block of normally intended statement that you want to repeat it out. Now, when Python runs a for loop, it assigns the items in an iterable object to the target one by one and executes the loop body for each of it. So the for loop also supports an additional else block which works exactly as it does in the while loop. That is, it is executed if the loop exits without running into a break statement. Again, the break and your continue statement also works the same in a for loop as they do in the while. So let's have a look on the program for this. We have that is the for program. Now for X in this target, the target is my X and the object has been given to me, that is the list. So in the list, at this point, that is the first, the value of your X will be 1. Then the X value for the second loop will be a 2. Then the third value for the X in the third loop will be a X. And ultimately in the fourth block, it will be a 4. So one by one, X will have all these values in your for loop. So this is the for loop working where each time, each value, that is, this is my target and this is my object. So target is associated with the object with your each working or each loop over here. Similarly, if you are working with the tuple, the first value it will have is your F, then it will have the value is your G, similarly with your H in your tuple. And the same way you can access in your dictionary, but the dictionary gives the access only to the keys. Now have a look over here, the access to the keys is in your D. So for each in your, for X in your D, X what it will print is the key over here. So it will just access the keys with your X in your for loop, and with this line that is your dx, I am just retrieving my values. So in list and your tuples, the values are represented, values are accessed with the help of your indexing, but in the dictionary you access it with the help of your keys. So do have a look on the example or the output of this program so that you can understand it in a better way. Now we have another for else program that is to just check a list, that is to check a number in my list. That is, I have defined a list that is 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 and I'm taking a number from my user. So for each object, that is the target, each object in my list, I am retrieving and checking whether this number is equal to the number which I have provided. Now the number that is your 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and your 7. So each time X will have the access to all the elements present over here. Now again in this next line, that is the if I'm checking. Now in the if, what I'm doing is I'm checking whether the number provided which is stored in my number is similar to my X or not. So number, each loop will contain, once it will contain true, once it will contain 3, once it will contain 4, 5, 6 and 7. So it will just check with the number which is provided by the user. If the number is same, whether it's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, it will just print found and move out of the block. So break will just give you the out of your block over here. If all the numbers are retrieved, all the numbers for each of the loop has been done, but still the number, still this condition is not true, then it will print the not found. So the else block only gets executed when it has not, when the loop in your, when your for loop, you haven't hit your break. So once you have hit your break, you won't be able to access the else block, but else block only hits or only works when you have not touched the break. Again, let's have a look on the output of this program. That is searching a list, which is the list, suppose it's my 2, so you can see that is the number found. But if I am searching a list number which is not present in, suppose 9, so you can see the number is not found.